be citizens of the world. They want to be cosmopolitan. And of course, we know what cosmopolitanism ended up with for Jews, under Stalin. First of all, I wish these goddamn Jews would understand that, even if you want to be all of that, they're not going to buy it. They're not going to take you. They're not interested in you anymore. They hate your guts. So, it's like, I wish these cosmopolitan Jews living in 2009, looking around the world and learning, say, from the BBC, admittedly hardly a neutral source, but that, according to some survey, Israel is the least popular country on earth, and that anti-Semitism is at all-time, it's probably as high as it was during the early 30s. They don't seem to get it that being a patriot in this country, that this is this is pretty much the only place we've got, apart from Israel, where we are not more or less tolerated guests in somebody else's house, where we are home and we are equal, and showing love for this country is appropriate, and not doing it is blind ingratitude and incredibly stupid and endangering Jewish interests. We live well and comfortably in this country, and this country has been a good friend to Israel, and it merits our loyalty. And I'm horrified and amazed that intelligent people don't understand that and don't see it.
What are, if any, what are American values?
Well, obviously when one talks about values, I guess one's always talking about ideals, because, in some ways, most societies, no matter how they define themselves, most people live the same kind of lives. They come home, they go to work, they watch television, they go to sleep, they have sex occasionally, they go to church or don't go to church. It doesn't really matter where they live. And most societies, no matter how much they say they believe in independent thinking and dissent and all the rest, pretty much value conformists and people who don't rock the boat. And that's true here too. Look, my own existence in the Jewish community is proof of that. I rock the boat, so they don't like me. For all their big talk about diversity and freedom of expression and all that crap, they don't believe in it for a second. But I do. But I do. I do think this is still a country where, where you can pretty much become whoever you want to become. I believe that, I do believe that that Americans are, for the most part, enormously tolerant and decent people. And I think that's shown in a whole variety of ways. Actually, in the context of what I do, immigration. This country has essentially been invaded by tens of millions of illegal foreigners, and yet there's scarcely been an act of violence by Americans, by people who are legal here, either citizens or legal residents. It's extraordinary. You hear people appropriately being very, very concerned when some stupid incident, a violent incident occurs, like, for example, there was a murder of an Ecuadorian in Patchogue, Long Island, when there was a kind of wilding incident on the part of a bunch of stupid teenagers. These things are dreadful. But they are very, very rare. And in fact, despite what you hear from groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center and so on and so forth, FBI statistics show that sort of quote-unquote hate crimes against Hispanics have gone down steadily as a in proportional terms for 10 years. You're still far more likely to be the victim of a hate crime if you're a Jew. That's number one, or black. So I believe, first of all, I believe this is a society in which people, for the most part, are very tolerant, kind of live and let live. I think, the way I lead my own life, I enjoy its freedoms to the hilt. I speak my mind publicly. I write. Only now, has my freedom of expression been impacted by Jewish organizations and the Southern Poverty Law Center? I don't know how severely. I mean, only time will tell. But quite frankly, until the Jewish establishment got in my way, my liberty to speak my mind, to think publicly, to express myself publicly about issues of that matter, has been utterly unimpeded. Certainly, the state has never never interposed itself. I think this is a society which puts a high premium, at least with creative people, on freedom of expression, on accepting a variety of lifestyles. All of those things I value highly. I mean, I wish I could say something, more interesting or creative than that. I mean, it's also, I think, it's a country of remarkable natural beauty. I happen to be someone who, I love getting out into the woods. My kid brother lives in Alaska. I'm a hiker, I'm a climber, and so I love the spiritual solace of the kind of, in the sort of exquisite spaces that we have in this country. And I like people in the boonies a whole lot. I mean, I like people in the country. I happen to live in a city. It's not where I prefer to live. It's where my work is. But as I say, I find Americans exceptionally kind and generous and tolerant. And at least I think people, for the most part, make a reasonable genuflection in the direction of, I think a reasonably sincere genuflection in the direction of belief in the Bill of Rights and in the First Amendment. Obviously there are groups here and there that don't, whether it's out of some hideous belief system or because it gets in the way of their political agenda. But I think ordinary people, for the most part, get it. I mean, I tend to prefer ordinary people to elites, and that's one of the things that I've really learned, I think, in the context of working on the immigration issue. That there's a lot more wisdom in ordinary people than in people who have PhDs, which, is a license. I mean, I learned, the stupidest people I ever met were on university campuses, tenured professors, and the whole system actually rewards stupidity because, well, I shouldn't say stupidity, it rewards ignorance because, essentially the way you gain status is by developing an expertise in a narrow area and then publishing it. So if you write 40 articles about the use of the semicolon in Cowper, likely and then get a book or two out of it, likelihood is you're going to be tenured. But you don't know anything about anything else. I mean, having a specialization is a license to be ignorant. That's why I tend to always like the generalists at universities better. And I like, as I say, I just like the common sense of ordinary people. I've always loved that quote of Bill Buckley's that he'd sooner have the first 600 names in the Boston phone book run the country than the faculty at Harvard. I've just run into a lot of educated idiots, and again, these are people. It's kind of like the New York Times phenomenon we were talking about. I mean, because someone happens to have an academic degree in, I don't know, plasma physics or something, doesn't mean that they're an expert on immigration. Or if they happen to have a PhD in comparative lit, comparing Fontana and Trollope, doesn't mean they're experts on the war in Afghanistan. But somehow there's this notion that if you got a doctorate, which is to say, you spent a lot of time going through an incredibly tedious exercise. I mean, I did that. It doesn't make you wiser than anybody else. I mean, it makes you a little more knowledgeable about something very specific. So, yeah, I mean, I think that that without wanting to sound like I don't know. I'm just actually again reading after years and years and years. I'm reading Dostoevsky's The Demons, which is a wonderful translation, and all these long conversations about the serfs and the peasants and loving ordinary people, and you think of the poetry of Wordsworth or something. I mean, I don't want to come across as some sort of romantic here about ordinary folk, but. I do think that ordinary people get things right more often than the elite does, and certainly in this issue, that is now the center of my life.